All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to For the World. We are here with none other than Jeff Dodds, CEO of Formula E and a titan in the business world with experience across media, OEMs, and government. First of all, Jeff, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. And second of all, would love to start. You seem to have the perfect background to run and grow a series like Formula E, which is a bit of a melange of all the things I just mentioned. What made you decide to take your expertise to Formula E and why now?
Uh, Hello, both. I'm still mildly distracted by being called a titan. To be called a titan from somebody called Antigone, it feels very classics, doesn't it? We've gone straight in on the classics on this podcast. Um, so maybe it's one of those things. The CV looks great when you look back at it. In the moment, kind of was never quite the plan. So first half of my career was spent in automotive. So I worked for a company called Premier Automotive Group. They used to be Ford Motor Company, Volvo, Aston Martin, Jaguar, Mercury, this kind of big amalgam of car brands. I worked for Volvo with them, and then I moved to Honda, the big Japanese company. And when I was at Honda, we raced everything. So we had Formula One, touring cars, MotoGP, World Superbikes, British Superbikes, Formula Four power boat racing. If it had an engine, they raced it, including lawnmowers, I might add. But if it had an engine, they raced it. And so I love motorsport. So I kind of grew up around motorsport. I've always watched it. I have a great passion for it. Love Formula One, love MotoGP. And then I drifted off from there and kind of spent the next half of my career in media and telco. I worked for a company called Virgin Media. So originally a kind of Richard Branson concept, was sold to a big American business called Liberty Global. And I worked with them for a number of years. And a few years ago, we merged the business called Virgin Media with O2, so a big UK mobile operator. And after settling in that business, I really got to a point where I thought, 12, 13 years of doing media telco and running bits of this business, that's probably long enough. I really fancy just kind of taking a break and resting and recharging and then deciding what else I wanted to do. I'm also the chair of a very big global charity called the Valuable 500. And I was an advisor, a non-exec for the UK government. So I had plenty going on. I didn't, it wasn't I desperately needed to rush into something else. And I spoke to the owner or the CEO of Liberty Global, a chap called Mike Freeze, and said, look, here, I'm thinking about this. What do you think? And he said, what I think is you should wait for a bit because I might have something really interesting that you will love. And
Nice.
and it didn't take him at his most persuasive to get me to take it. Like 14, 15 months. They're like motorsport is like dog years, isn't it? It's like 7 or 8 times. So I really feel like I've been here 10 years. I think I had like really long flowing hair and a lustrous dark beard when I started it. But yeah, so here I am. But you're right in the respect that when I look back, I mean, a lot of this job is about media deals. A lot of it's about broadcast. A lot of it's about marketing and PR and influencers and talent management. And a bit of it is about cars and racing them. And I guess I have little bits of all of that in my career.
Well said. Indeed. So what has been your favorite highlight or moment of season 10 so far?
That's a great question. Let me start on the track and then maybe I'll broaden it out a little bit. I think on the track, there's been a few moments. So in Sao Paulo, we had Felipe Massa there, Emerson Fittipaldi, Emerson doing the flag in Sao Paulo, and of course McLaren, Sam Bird. Sam Bird won for the first time ever for McLaren in Formula E. And Emerson was there. Last time he won on that track was with McLaren. So that was a pretty emotional moment. So seeing Ian James, the team principal of McLaren's electric teams, and Emerson Fittipaldi, Emerson in tears, hugging it out in the McLaren garage was a lovely, lovely moment. Tokyo was pretty special. So inaugural race in Tokyo, first time they've ever shut the streets of Tokyo for a motorsport event. In fact, first time they've ever shut it for anything other than the Tokyo Marathon, I think.
Wow.
So to be standing there on the grid, absolute full capacity. We sold the tickets out in literally minutes after we went on sale. I had the Prime Minister of Japan on one side, the Governor of Tokyo on the other side on the grid, screaming fans, everyone waving a Nissan flag. And kind of agreeing the race in Tokyo was one of the first things I did as I arrived. So to kind of have that, let's go for it. Let's secure this race in Tokyo, then have that moment of standing on the grid in Tokyo and for it to be absolutely full. And that was pretty special. And then I think maybe off the track, to be a little selfish, in Portland, which is the last race we had, on the Friday before the race, first of the two races, Robert Wickens, I don't know if you read that, but Robert Wickens came to test the car. And for anybody listening in who doesn't know Robert's story, so Robert was perhaps one of the most talented junior racers of all time, coming through, test driving for Formula One, was seen as one of the top rising stars in IndyCar, was actually doing remarkably well in IndyCar, had a very large accident in one of the IndyCar races, crashed out, actually was quadriplegic as a result of the accident. Regained over time, I think a lot of therapy and a lot of determination on his side, regained use of his arms, never regained use of his legs. But I saw Robert again very soon after I started. I had breakfast with Robert in Indianapolis. I was out there seeing Michael Andretti, and Robert and I arranged to meet. And I had breakfast with this most amazingly determined individual who was just desperate to prove that he could still compete at the highest level. He got back into racing in the Pilot Series with Hyundai, actually went on to win that, but it's a two-person series in effectively a touring car. And he really wanted to get back into open-seater or open-wheel single-seater racing. So it then went quiet, but Robert thought it had gone quiet fully. But in the background with the FIA, we were adapting and working on the car. So Spark, who make the car and adapt the car and set it up for us, were making an adapted version of the Formula E car that Robert could drive. So when we contacted him and said, look, we've adapted the car, come to Portland and let's see how it feels, he was kind of speechless because he just assumed it was another one of those conversations you have that never go anywhere. And he came to the track. It's the first time he'd been in a single-seater car since the accident.
Wow.
He got into that adapted car, and we just said, look, just have fun and just see how it feels. As it happens, how they'd adapted the steering wheel was a bit awkward for him, because as he turned the sharp corners at Portland, he had to release the buttons that were the throttle and then had to go back on. So he wasn't able to keep the power down through all of the corners, the tight corners. But he basically put down a time in his second or third lap that was 3 or 4 seconds outside of the qualifying times that the drivers were doing the day after. So it's an amazing moment for me, because in some respects we got to show Robert that he can still compete at that level, which for me in some respects feels like a win in itself. But what came off of it was a lot of the teams talking to him to say, look, we have a rookie test coming up at the start of next year. Are you open to coming to put in a proper test to see if we can get you into a seat? So that's a long answer, I guess. I've given you 3. I cheated,
That's
Jez.
incredible.
I gave you 3, but it's a long season that goes in the blink of an eye. And if I sat here for another hour, I'm sure I come up with 20 other things. That whether it's Sun Kang with the Liberty Walk guys for the adapted, making their adapted car in Tokyo was also amazing. First time back in China since COVID in Shanghai was amazing. But I suspect, if you ask me that question in a week's time, given what's about to unfold in London and how delicately balanced that whole thing is, maybe the answer will relate to this weekend, not what's gone before.
Well, we certainly hope so, because I will be there, which I'm very excited for.
Very cool. Very cool. Why aren't you both going to be there?
I know. I'm trying to get Chessa to come.
Chessa, what's the deal?
Oh, I just started a new job, so I have a lot of work. And Tiggy's actually going to the Olympics too.
Is it a new job that requires you to work on Saturday and Sunday?
Oh, yeah, you got me there.
Great question.
Yeah, I can feel we have offices at all the races, because obviously the teams have to work away there. So you can like duck in and out. You can sit there doing all your preppy stuff in the office, like work related, come out, watch the race, office. Get back. Yeah, I'm super cool with that.
I'll keep working on her. Don't worry. No, but that's an incredible answer, because it shows how passionate you are about this series and how many exciting moments there are. And we want to dig in a little bit to the mission side of Formula E. Obviously, the way it was started, there's a big focus on sustainability. And I'm curious if the mission side of things and the focus on sustainability and on electric and on changing transportation was part of the reason you joined, and kind of what you think about what role can and should sports play in the broader
Yeah.
conversation of tackling climate change?
So I think, by the way, I realize this could sound like a very privileged answer, because not everybody has the ability to only choose roles that kind of align very closely with their value set. Not everyone's lucky to be in that position. I found myself at almost every stage of my career to land in an organization where what they cared about, I cared about. So whether it was Honda, and I'll tell you a little interesting, funny story about Honda. It was funny, but it's interesting. So I haven't been at Honda for 15, 16, 17 years, a long time, maybe even longer than that. But Honda, whenever they get new interns coming into the business, once they get a certain critical mass, like 20 or 30 of them, they do an induction session where one of the executive team will come to the session, and they tell them about the history of Soichiro Honda, the founder, what he cared about. It was all about racing. It was all about the environment. And they do this full-on kind of induction session. Now, I haven't been there for, as I say, nearly 20 years. If someone phoned me today and said, oh my God, we've got an induction session going on just around the corner from your house, and the exec that was going could make it, any chance, I could walk in there today and still present that induction.
Wow.
And the same would be the case for Virgin Media and then for Liberty Global. And I think if you're lucky enough to find yourself in organizations where you can really connect with what they care about, it makes such a massive difference. And I definitely wouldn't have gone anywhere from Liberty Global. But when I looked at this business, now I knew a bit about it already. So I'd been as a fan to watch races in New York with my son. And I knew what was going on here. But the things I care about in terms of sustainability, social and environmental, I'd done a lot of work on social sustainability and inclusion and belonging, and trying to create opportunities for everyone who has potential, but perhaps not the opportunity to realize that potential. All those things really matter to me. Fascinated with automotive, love cars, really interested in technology and innovation, came out of a kind of broadband telco business. Of course I did. So when I put all those things together and I turned up here to be part of something which is, if you think about the EV revolution, to be part of an organization that is really trailblazing in that space. So the manufacturers in Formula E are learning things about EV development on the racetrack, like a laboratory, and it's going back to their production and their R&D departments who are using that in the cars they're building for the future, for tomorrow. So that for me is amazing.
Yeah.
At the same time, wherever we race, we try and leave a positive social legacy, so a positive social impact. We're also the only sport in the world that signed up to science-based targets. We're the number one sport in the world for ESG and sustainability. So to be able to kind of get all the things that are important to me out of a job that's just super exciting and really good fun and has such a lot of growth potential is a bit of a blessing, really.
It's amazing.
Absolutely.
And you mentioned the laboratory.
Yeah.
And we've always talked about how motorsport can be sort of like an R&D lab for the real world. What technologies in FE do you think have the biggest impact to change the broader automotive industry?
Yeah. So first of all, I should say, and I have to declare this because people think I'm super anti-Formula One, by the way, but I'm actually, like you are, a massive Formula One fan. So we could nerd off about Formula One for hours. but so I love Formula One. But Formula One drives on a technology that's effectively 130 years old. So, you know, the internal combustion engine, the Otto engine, 1896 or something, it was created. And they've effectively optimized and iterated that technology to within an inch of its life. So they have absolutely maximized the potential out of that technology. In order to get more out of it, of course, the investments are very high, and you know, fortunately, the cost caps are very high as well, so they can make those investments. We are in the infancy of this technology. So the first time we saw a road car launched with EV capability en masse, I guess, I think was 2008, and that was the Tesla Roadster. Then the Nissan Leaf and various other cars came through, but we're in the infancy of the technology. So genuinely, there are learnings around the powertrain and battery technology and how those two things communicate with each other. We're also a massive software-driven series. So there is constant, if you went and sat in a garage, you know, when a car comes in to Formula One or NASCAR, IndyCar, you pop the hood or you're removing the chassis and there are usually spanners in the garage. rarely happens in Formula E. What you see is someone plugging in a laptop really quickly and starting to code and work on code. It's a very, very different type of tech. So where we are right now in the tech means powertrain development is on an incredible curve. So the fact that we go from 0 to 60 of 2.7 seconds now, and in December the new car gets there in 1.8 seconds, a 35% reduction, is because we have two powertrains, a front and rear. We're activating both, so it becomes all-wheel drive on powertrain tech. And the batteries, you've only got to go back to the start of Formula E. The batteries couldn't last a race. So you had these crazy kind of triathlon transitions where a driver would jump out of one car, get into another car to do the second half of the race. Now the batteries last for the whole race, and we're leading battery technology. And I imagine within 5 to 6 years, we'll be on solid state battery where it comes down and it's a quarter of the size, but more powerful than the batteries that exist today. So we're kind of at the cutting edge of all this tech. And when I talk to the manufacturers, they always kind of drop a story in that I don't know about. And I'm like, what? That's crazy. So if you talk to Jaguar, there's a wonderful story where they say, oh yeah, well, we learned some really cool stuff about how the software, how we can drive more efficiency out of the battery through the software and how we code it and the powertrain interaction. And what we learned on the racetrack, we realized would work just as well on the road. So for the I-Pace range of cars, the Jaguar I-Pace, they were able to do an over-the-air update to the software in the I-Pace. And people went to bed and woke up the following day and they had 35 more kilometers of range on their battery.
That's so cool.
Yeah, so stuff like that. I hear these stories and I'm like, that's why what we do is really important, because we know the transition from hybrid or petrol or diesel cars to electric vehicles comes with some nervousness for people around range anxiety and performance of the car and charging ability and stuff like that. Anytime we can show that things are moving in a positive direction, it's amazing for me because it speeds up the migration.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where it's not only affecting the drivers on track, that has the impact or the potential to impact millions, billions across the world, which is
100%. Yeah.
Incredible.
And if you go to places like China, so we race in Shanghai, of course, roughly 1 in every 2 new cars sold in China are electric vehicles already. The infrastructure is unbelievable when you're in Shanghai. And over there, some of the conversations we'd have in Europe, for example, are just not being had because everyone's already bought into the concept. They bought into the tech. The Chinese EV manufacturers are leading the world in terms of development, certainly on scale. And that's the journey we're going on for the rest of the world. And that's why it's really important for us that we keep a global footprint.
Yeah, absolutely. So we talked about how the technology of Formula E is at the infancy, but I think people also forget the Formula E is a relatively new series. It's only about a decade old, and it's the fastest growing motorsport series. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I think that's
correct,
true.
Yeah.
And so why do you think the series is best positioned to become the largest in motorsport? And do you view other series as competitors, as allies, both?
Yeah. So I'll be a bit nerdy for a second because I'll just throw some numbers at you. So you're right, we're a decade, we're in our 10th year. This is our 10th season, but you've got to really factor in 2 massively disruptive years because of COVID in the middle.
Yeah.
And for a startup business, if you imagine a startup business that's event driven, which we are, getting to a point where it's just started to really get to maximum speed of growth and then be literally stopped in its tracks, no pun intended, stopped in its tracks by COVID for effectively 2 seasons. It was massively disrupted. So you could argue we're 10 years old. You could also argue that we're just 2 or 3 years into rebuilding the business. 10 years ago, there were 0 Formula E fans in the world. We didn't exist. Today, there are around 400 million Formula E fans in the world.
Amazing.
I'll put that in context for you. And we use the same survey methodology that other motorsports use. So Formula One will have probably between 850 million fans around the world. MotoGP, about 510 million fans around the world. And then we're there at 400. Both MotoGP and Formula One are about 75 years old. So if you think about how far we've come in such an incredibly short period of time. But I also think, to your question about allies, competitors, I always say, Formula One doesn't have to fail for us to be successful, or vice versa. There are roughly, I think it's a $60 billion industry, motorsport, and there are 2 billion motorsport fans around the world. That is more than enough of an industry to sustain 2 world championship single-seater series with very different fan bases. Because Formula One is predominantly, you guys will break the mold.
We're trying.
Predominantly male, predominantly a bit older, and often grow up with a legacy of Formula One in the family, which is they've grown up watching it with a grandfather or a grandparent or a grandmother or a mum or dad on the sofa. So Formula E fans, 50-50 split male female. Half our audience under the age of 40, and a lot of them, not all of them, a lot of them new to motorsport. And if you think about it, it's quite a different proposition. So I was at Silverstone last weekend, weekend before, watching the British Grand Prix. And when I look around, we're very different propositions. So Silverstone for me feels like often Formula One does really a festival. It's a festival experience. Whereas so for me, going to Silverstone to watch the Grand Prix is a bit like going to Glastonbury. I'm driving there, it's heavy traffic, I'm parking in the field, I'm cutting in through the hedge or the fence and with the burger vans and everything. And it's a real festival feeling, which I love, by the way. It's a real festival feeling. Coming to Formula E and you'll come to London feels more like going to a Taylor Swift concert, which is it's much more condensed, high entertainment. The racing itself is 40 minutes, 45 minutes. It's not an hour and a half. It's just a different feeling. It's more family oriented. It's shorter. Arguably, the event experience is more polished. It's just very different. I love going to a festival and I love going to a concert. And therefore, I don't see why we have to force people to choose which one of those things they prefer. They can love them both. And then when you factor in the growth of EV technology, for me, that is a tailwind, which we continue to ride. By 2035, most countries in the world have committed to not allow new car sales to be anything other than alternative fuel, including electric. So you wouldn't be able to buy a petrol or diesel car. I think Norway goes first in 2025. You have a whole tranche go in 2030, and then the remainder largely go in 2035, which for me means in 10 years' time, we will be the preeminent technology. You won't be able to buy a car that's not alternative fuel. And therefore, over the next 10 years, I expect us to continue to grow as we ride that wave of technology take up. And then that to be a very interesting moment to see what happens around that time. I have 2 boys. I've got a 15-year-old and a 13-year-old. The likelihood is they will never drive a car that isn't electric technology, and maybe beyond that, a different technology in the future. So that's why it's really important to me we keep connecting with this younger audience and bringing them through, because they are natives of the EV revolution. They're not transitory like I was. I started life in a pure petrol car on leaded fuel, then I went to unleaded fuel, then I went to a hybrid car, then I went to an electric car. I've been on that entire journey. They will start their journey with EV tech.
That's so exciting, and definitely for the future. It's definitely where we're going, and I think it's great that Formula E is riding that wave. And you did mention Formula One and other FIA championship series. How much are you actually collaborating, talking to, for example, Stefano, about the growth and strategy of FE on the sustainability side? Is there conversations happening there?
There isn't really. So I would say we don't collaborate particularly. Right. But actually we race in a couple of the same places though. So we obviously race in Mexico City on the same circuit. We race in Shanghai on the same circuit, but that's not intentional. So we don't work in collaboration. Formula One is actually owned by a company called Liberty Media. Formula E is owned by a company called Liberty Global. Unsurprisingly, because there's a similarity in the name, the chair of both of those organizations is a gentleman called John Malone, so a very famous US businessman. So if you track up high enough up the tree, you actually get to the same chairperson, you get to John Malone. But they're very separate businesses, independently listed on the NASDAQ, run separately. So I wouldn't say there's no opportunity to collaborate in the future, but it's not something that happens today. And I think largely because our similarity is we're world championships, we race under the FIA regulations, we're both single-seater, and we're open wheel. Outside of that, you've got DNA in street racing, city racing, their DNA in big circuit racing, largely out of town. You've got petrol, now hybrid, combustion. You've got fully electric vehicle. You've got real focus on sustainability. You've got an emerging interest in becoming more sustainable, which are quite different things. We're just very, whilst there are similarities in their racing cars, if you scratch beneath the surface of that, we're fundamentally very, very different series.
Yeah. Another difference is one could argue the level of competition on the track. So heading into London, we have 7 drivers in contention for the championship, which is incredible. And the level of competitiveness in both series has led to a highly publicized bet from you. You'll give $250,000 to the charity of choice of the driver who beats Max Verstappen in the F1 championship. Are you still feeling 99% confident that Max Verstappen will be the 2024 F1 championship? Is that bet still on?
So look, I often get taken out of context. I didn't on that particular occasion, but I think I was rather publicly put on the back page of a lot of UK newspapers for saying I said F1's boring. Now, just so we're clear, a lot of people in F1 were saying F1 is boring at that particular time.
Absolutely.
So totally I don't think there was anything massively controversial about that. I think what I said about F1 at the time was, look, F1 goes in cycles, and you see dominance. You either see manufacturer dominance, and you'd rarely see a driver dominance without the car being dominant as well. When the two collide, and you get a great driver in a dominant car, you can see these long periods of dominance. And we saw it with Lewis, we saw it with Michael Schumacher, and we're seeing it with Max. And my point on that was simply, when you've wrapped up the series win roughly halfway through the season, that's not massively exciting for Formula One fans, because then you're showing an interest in what comes second or who comes third or the battles behind the lead. Now, I feel marginally more optimistic this season because I think, not that I want to spend this whole pod talking about Formula One, but I feel like other cars have got slightly better, and the Red Bull car hasn't developed particularly beyond where it was, and therefore the gap has closed. And for me, whether it's Lando or Charles or Carlos or whoever, George or Lewis from the weekend, seeing more people in contention makes it more interesting. But, and I think we're 12 races in to Formula One season. By the way, I'm no expert on this, so I don't have the data in front of me. But I think we're 12 races in, and I think Max has won 7 of those, and the other 5 have been won by one person each. Charles, Carlos, Lewis, George, and have I missed one?
Lando.
So, and he's 75 points ahead or whatever he's ahead. So I'm feeling pretty good that the bet is safe on one hand. On the other hand, I don't feel bad that it's becoming much more competitive, because a very healthy and exciting Formula One is great for all motorsport, because it just creates a halo over motorsport, which attracts more people in to watch it. So I feel like I'm good on both counts. I'm good that the bet's probably safe, and I feel better that it's becoming a more competitive proposition. But you are so right, Tiggy. In the 9 seasons that have gone before a Formula E, there's only been one 2-time winner. That was Jean-Eric Verne. Every other season been won by whether it's Nick De Vries or Stoffel Van Dorn or Jake Dennis last year. Every season that I can think of has come down to the last race undecided. And this one's particularly sticky because we come to the last race with 7 mathematically that could win it. I'm not doing Antonio Felix da Costa, and I'm trying not to do Ollie Rowland a disservice here, but probably more realistically 3. Although I think, given Dax on a run 3 in a row and 4 out of 5, I wouldn't write off if he wins the first one. He'll have his sights on the second one. But I think really Nick Cassidy, Mitch Evans, and Pascal Wehrlein are up for a blockbuster weekend. And if Nick doesn't win the first race and one of those other 2 guys does, I think the shackles are all off for Sunday. I think it's going to be, and that is a complicated racing circuit. As in, it's tight, it's technical, has a very technical section where you go from the inside section to the outside section. If we get a bit of UK drizzle, as we had last year, where you go from perfectly dry, beautiful indoor surface to the outdoor section, that is squirrely, and therefore it could be an interesting weekend. Put it this way, no one's etching the trophy yet.
Yes.
Well
So
said.
exciting.
It's going to be absolutely thrilling. So, last question here before we jump into some of our fun rapid fire questions that we usually wrap with. So, we're American. We know that the US is one, a huge market for EV sales, two, has a lot of manufacturers, and three, has this massive, what we think is an untapped motorsport fandom.
Yeah.
And next year we have Miami and Portland for the FE series. So, talk to us about how you're envisioning the US market and the growth that you could see as you expand here.
So the way I describe it, I like all motorsports. So obviously follow IndyCar, follow NASCAR as well. So the way I describe the continuum of motorsport is, on one end, you've got Formula One. In terms of competitive nature of the race, is a very predictable at the moment. It might change. At the other end, and actually I would say qualification is incredibly important. You want to start at the front of the grid, etc., etc., etc. At the other end, you get NASCAR, which is just like a donkey derby of motor racing, which is rubbings racing. Everyone's jutted up to each other. They're kind of rustling the whole way around. And you largely get us an IndyCar sitting in the middle somewhere, which is, more competitive than Formula One, but not a combat sport, right? So you get we sit in the middle. When we've raced in the US and we've raced in Portland, we raced there for the first time last year. And I was there. I was kind of talking to fans coming in. I was talking to fans going out, and it was predominantly an IndyCar fan base because it's the PIR that used to IndyCar racing there. And coming in, there was a lot of them, which was good, very intrigued. But coming in kind of a bit, don't know what this is, electric vehicles, a bit strange. Then there was a moment of, oh my God, we've never seen infrastructure like this at an IndyCar race, because there's big premium hospitality, massive fan village, loads of entertainment, kind of things that they haven't experienced at an IndyCar race. So a bit blown away by that. And then leaving, it was all about, that's some of the most competitive racing we've ever seen.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So to race Saturday, Sunday there this year, and for Sunday's crowd to actually be bigger than Saturdays, which is unheard of on a race weekend, and for everyone to see great racing again, gives me massive confidence that the US market likes that style of racing. Yeah. We've also got Roku and CBS as big broadcast partners in the US, so that's very helpful. And we're beginning to find much more interest from US media, US celebrities contacting us, because we fit with a lot of the sustainability angle, which is a lot of celebs, a lot of broadcasters are really interested in motorsport, but also really interested in progression and sustainability. So we tick those boxes. So I've always said, Cheza, that we really want to be having multiple races in the US. Now we're in Miami next year, but whether it's Los Angeles, New York, Atlanta, Detroit, Phoenix, all places we're talking to, I think we can sustain 2 very big races in the US, and then we see whether the appetite goes beyond that. But also we've got 2 big US teams. We have Michael Andretti, and we have Jay Penske. They're doing pretty well. What we don't have, as you know, is an American-born OEM. So we don't have General Motors or Ford today. And I'm super keen. I would love to have one of those 2 organizations, dive in, because I think they would bring an enormous amount of interest, US interest, to the series. And I think, the combination, not suggesting this would be the combination, but, a combination of an Andretti or Penske with a big US car manufacturer coming in as well, I think it would be amazing for the sport.
Yeah, we would certainly love that.
Yeah.
So to wrap up, these will hopefully be pretty easy for you. Some quick rapid fire questions. First up, if you had to choose a favorite Formula E technology, what would it be?
Actually, I'm going to go with the software, because I think the future is software driven, data driven, AI driven, and we absolutely lead the charge in that space.
Amazing. Favorite FE race?
Racetrack or race? Do you mean what's my favorite FE racetrack? Circuit?
Yes, let's do that.
I'm going to go with Sao Paulo.
Okay, good answer. Favorite sport outside motorsport, to watch or to participate in?
I'm sitting in like a cave of sporting memorabilia. So the 2 sports I would say I spend most time engaging and reading. I'm a massive sport fan. I watch every sport. From my wife famously tells the story of her being woken up in the middle of the night during the Olympics with me getting excited, bouncing up and down on the bed, and it was the dressage. Yeah. So like I'm like not a good person to ask because I get excited about everything. I would say golf. Golf I play the most. If I'm because I use it for mindfulness than anything else. And I love being out in nature. My son's playing. Boxing I absolutely love, passionate about it. But rugby, cricket, I literally watch everything.
I love that. And dressage. Good to know.
Who doesn't? Who doesn't love a bit of dressage? Or as I call it, horse dancing.
I would love to go to dressage at the Olympics in a couple weeks at Versailles. Seems
there we go. Well, that would be an amazing place to see it as well.
And last question, your favorite or best hometown recommendation, restaurant, museum, anything that you love
London?
To do? Yeah.
Is it for you or for anybody coming?
Anybody.
Because they're different
Anyone
things.
listening.
Yeah.
So I'm biased because I've been in the city for most of my life, and I love lots of cities around the world, but it's home for me, and therefore, you know, I would implore everyone to come and see it. I'm going to go on restaurant then, and I'm going to say if you love a good steak, somewhere like Goodman's Steakhouse is just absolutely fantastic, right in the heart of the city. If it's to watch entertainment, I have to say this weekend it has to be us, doesn't it? But you've also got Lord's Cricket Ground, you've got the Oval, you've got Wembley, you've got Twickenham for rugby. If you're coming for a sporting event, some of the best sporting stadiums in the world. But if I have a hankling for kind of home cooked food, then it's Goodman's Steakhouse.
Okay, I'll add that to my list for next week.
Very good. So where are you both based, by the way? Where are you dialing in from?
Both in New York City.
So you're both sitting in New York City now?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So we wouldn't say no to Effie coming back to New York.
Yes.
Okay, well, we need to find the right venue if we're going to come back to New York, don't we? Maybe you can direct us. Send us a Google Maps image.
Absolutely. Well, Jeff, thank you so much. This has been an incredible conversation. We really enjoyed it, and wishing you the best of luck for this weekend. And we can't wait to be there in person.
Thank you very much. I'll see you there.